Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Volleytalk, Powercore 360 with Billy and Darian. This is our 7th episode, and today we are going to be talking about how to build muscle memory fast in the volleyball arm swing and what does the correct arm swing actually look like. So we are going to get kind of right into things today. I know last week we really dove into how pro volleyball players breaking down their swings and college volleyball players. So this week we're going to kind of expand on that, but we're going to tell you guys and show you guys, not necessarily show you, but show you guys examples of the YouTube video that we have out on how your brain can build memory faster to then create muscle memory for your volleyball swing. So we are going to get in all of those things today. I'm going to start out by handing it over to Billy. Billy, if you want to just briefly introduce yourself.
Yeah, Billy Glisan, PC360 founder, and probably worthy or related to today's discussion. I'm an exercise physiologist, so I'm going to tend to come to things like muscle memory from a physiologist perspective. I'm also a strength coach. The two work together, but a lot of my real background academically or educationally was as a physiologist.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. So, how we're going to start today is since we're going to talk about how to build muscle memory for your arm swing, we want to show you what arm swing you actually want to be building that muscle memory for. We strongly believe in there is a right way to swing your arm and there is an incorrect way. So, we want to show you guys an example of an athlete actually from our master class that built their arm swing with us. So I'm going to reorient us here for a second and pull up this video. All right. So if everybody can see this video, and audience, if you have any questions about this arm swing or about what this athlete is doing or anything Billy and I say, please put them in the comment section below, and we will make sure to answer those today. So thank you all for being here, and let's get into this video. So we're going to watch, she's a 14-year-old in this video, and I guess, Billy, you can probably better explain than I can.
Yeah, so this is an athlete who was 14 at the time. She was in like week 3 of our 8-week master class, power hitting master class. And this is just part of her homework she's turning in where she's jumping. So that's the preview. And you're going to see this was actually, it was really a cool moment for her. She wasn't, quite honestly, you should go back and watch this video later, the whole thing. Because this is just, at the beginning of this, is just a very average 14-year-old looking swing. But this was a moment she was having doing her homework where some things started to happen where all of a sudden she took on some world-class movements from world-class power hitters 3 weeks into her program and as a 14-year-old. So that's kind of the background on it.
Awesome. So we're going to get into the swing here. And she's going up for her approach. And Billy, do you want to kind of talk through what exactly she's doing in this arm swing?
Yeah, so there might be 3 different swings in this sequence, and I don't remember which one this is 1 or 2. It really doesn't matter. But her mom's it's in a racquetball court, squash court. She's tossing a ball she's about to hit. She's doing her homework, hitting some live balls. And we're really focusing here on trying to get in the reverse power C. So reverse power C, as we've described before, is like a capital C in the English language, but it's flipped around, right? So you could draw on her body between her hitting elbow, all the way down to her body and up to her right leg. And so that's her 3 weeks into this program. We're not teaching her to get into the reverse power C. The training that we do, the really good athletes, if they're doing the homework, their body naturally starts to kind of self-organize. It organizes itself and starts to make some of these things happen based on the cues and training we're giving them. Anyway, you can see with her right leg, we talked about some of this last week. The right leg is coming up behind the body, the knees bent, the left leg's still a little straight. We talked about that last week. Belly button, if she was on a court, her belly button would be pointing towards the right antenna. That's what we teach her as a right-handed hitter, kind of hitting left side. The chest, as she goes through this, is starting to turn to the right sideline. So if you could take the center of her chest, it would go to the right sideline, and we create what we call, once again, hip and shoulder separation. That's a separation between the turn of the hips and turn of the chest and shoulders. She's already got that. In other words, if you look at the belly button, it's to the right antenna. You can kind of imagine that the right side of that squash court is the right side of the volleyball court. And so her chest is turned or open more to the right sideline. That stretches the abdominal muscle. That's awesome. The other thing is we look at her right arm. Her right arm has kind of come down underneath that shoulder line. The shoulder line is an imaginary diagonal line from her right shoulder, excuse me, her left shoulder down to her right shoulder. And you can see her right elbow is just slightly above that. That's a really good position to be put into. Her body is wound up, coiled up, like we talked about last week, like a snake coiled up and ready to strike. The hitting muscles are stretched, loaded, and getting ready to hit a ball, right? Using the entire body versus just swinging her arm and maybe her shoulder at it.
Right. All right. So if we move on further in this swing, let's see.
So what you're going to start to notice here, and you're going to see this was me talking in the video, going back and forth, breaking down her swing and showing different things happening in her swing. If you go right now this is a little further in the swing. So let's just hold there for a second, Darian. And so now both feet and legs are up behind the body. Now you can really see belly button towards the right sideline, chest to the right, belly button to the right antenna, chest to the right sideline, arms in a really good position, right elbow is 90 degrees. That's exactly what we teach. That's what world-class hitters, in our opinion, male or female in the world, this is the position they get into. And of course, like we talked about last week, on a good swing, then they're going to start to kick the feet. The kick of the feet turns the belly button and hips from right to left. It pulls the rib cage through. The entire body creates all these forces. And now the arm gets whipped through, right? And the elbow will come up high late in the process to go up and hit the ball. So let's play that, Darian, and see if we can see all that, even though I'm going to be talking when I was doing this analysis. Let's see if you can see that.
Oh, sorry.
It's all right.
There we go. So this is after the swing now, after the power.
Actually, after the body, the feet and legs have started to kick, the hips are starting to turn, the chest is starting to close and belly button closing. But notice how the elbow's coming up, right? Last, the body rotates and then the arm comes through. This is not a perfect swing. This is, once again, in week 3 of the program, her body's starting to do, as part of the training, the things we're wanting her body to get into, that reverse power C position. It's really advanced, by the way, and most athletes are not in week 3 when they're doing this. This is just her having what we call a real moment, trying to figure this out.
Right. And I think, audience, I want to address you guys for a second. If you guys do have any questions or comments, we want to know, have you ever been told about the reverse power C position? How have you been told to load your arms, or parents out there, coaches, how are you guys telling your athletes to load their arms, etc.? We want to hear from you guys out there what you're thinking while we continue this.
So I guess the next piece I want to talk about here is, why are we showing this? It's kind of an introduction for what we're talking about today, which is muscle memory. How do you build muscle memory fast, right? Especially in this situation, this swing, to go in the air, pull your feet up behind you, kick your feet, turn your hips, turn your chest, swing your arm, land facing the left antenna on 2 feet. That is a super complicated, super complex movement, right? Like maybe one of the hardest sports movements there are. And now you've got a 13-year-old athlete at the time. It's not perfect with it, but starting to get it 3 weeks into her training, right? So it's really cool that she's getting that. But the muscle memory, so let's make that a segue into, how do you create the muscle memory to do this? Because it doesn't happen easy. It doesn't happen automatically. And let's talk about that if we can.
Yeah. So we're going to start by discussing, one second while I get this other YouTube video pulled up. This is actually YouTube from Powercore 360's YouTube channel. So if you want to watch this and really understand the science behind everything, we'll get into a little bit of today, but it is very complex stuff. So we won't be able to get into all of it. If you want to watch a whole video on the actual science behind it, we will link this in our YouTube description below. Or if you just go to our YouTube channel and search how to build muscle memory fast in a volleyball arm swing, that is the title of the video. So you can look it up and watch it there. So again, if you do want more information, that is where you can find it. But I really want to, like Billy said, get into this. We're building muscle memory now for that swing that we just showed. And what does that look like? How, Billy, do you build muscle memory, and how do you build it quickly? Because these athletes have only how many weeks now until school ball starts, right? Like everybody's entering into the summer season. Everybody's starting to want to train for the summer, get better, and then head into volleyball season in middle of August. So it's gonna come faster than a lot of people expect, especially if you don't have a training program in place already. So what are, I guess, if you want to start with maybe some of the little, like not all of the anatomy that you discussed in the video, but a little touch on that, I guess.
Yeah, and let's just get into maybe a simple as I can make it definition of what muscle memory is, because parents come to us and they're wanting they're hearing things like, well, will you guys help build a muscle memory? Yeah, that's what we do, but we want them to understand it's not necessarily a quick process. So anyway, not to fall down a very deep anatomical rabbit hole where we get into too much of the body. You can watch the video if you want to do that, but here's what you need to know. When you practice a sport, you use certain muscles to perform a movement needed for that sport. So we're talking about the arm swing. And just a minute ago when we were watching that athlete, if we were just thinking for a second that the right arm was coming down underneath the shoulder, kind of down underneath diagonally under that shoulder line we talk about, the muscles themselves don't work alone, or they don't have their own memory. So instead, to make that movement happen, to bring the arm down underneath, because it naturally wants to fly up overhead, right? When we talked about last week, the arms want to go up and they want to go up to help you jump. But to create this new muscle memory, we need to understand that the signals aren't coming from the muscles themselves. The signals to make this movement of the body, specifically the arm here, they come from the brain, right? And the brain tells the body when and how to move. The brain sends signals through the nerves. It goes, right? So the signals, and it's kind of what I'm pointing out on the video. You see the brain, and there's the brain stem, and all these different muscles we're talking about on here. But basically, the nerves carry little bits of electricity, kind of like electricity going through the wires in your wall, right? Or in an extension cord. It's carrying electricity from one end of the wire to the other. Well, that's what's happening. The instructions are actually up here in the brain and through the spinal cord, and then down to the nerves and the muscles you're trying to use. And in this example, we're talking about muscles on the shoulder and the bicep, and then the shoulder blade is in gold in there. And then there's some lower muscles called your lower trapezius, really important muscles when we're talking about hitting hard and protecting your shoulder. But anyway, the nerves carry these little bits of electricity from the brain down to the muscle. When the signal's strong enough, when there's enough electricity going from your brain down to the muscles, what's going to happen is this. It makes the muscle at the end of that nerve active. It engages it, right? If it's a strong enough bit of electricity going through, the muscle's going to tighten up. It's going to work. It's going to move your bones. It's going to move your arm, your body, your chest, whatever the muscles you're trying to work. So that's kind of what happens, right? Muscle memory, it really isn't in the muscles. The muscles are dumb, right? They really are, and I don't mean that in a bad sense, but there's really no memory that gets stored inside the muscles. It's in the brain, and it's actually in the nervous system and in the spinal cord. Over time, your brain learns to remember how to send the right signals to the right muscles to make a specific movement happen smoothly and in a coordinated fashion, right? That's one of the things you see in an athlete that's been training for a while, right? You take the average 13 or 14-year-old, their movements are rough, they're herky-jerky, they're not smooth. Look at that athlete. If that athlete trains, or you look at a pro athlete or a collegiate athlete that's been doing it 5, 6, 7 years, they look smooth, they look effortless. The reason they do that is the nervous system has done this over and over, this movement so many times, it's learned how to coordinate the movement. So if we're talking about, for example, when playing volleyball and you're trying to hit a ball and trying to move the arm in the ways we want it to be moved with speed and in a great position, the brain sends signals from the brain through the nerves into the muscles, the chest, the arms, and shoulder to make that swinging motion happen effortlessly, consistently, in a coordinated fashion. So that's really kind of what muscle memory is. It's not muscle memory, it's the brain. The instructions get written in the brain, they get stored in the brain, and then it happens through what we call myelin, right? And myelin, let's go ahead and jump into that for a second. That's a really important part of the process. Myelin is nothing more than a fat substance that your body produces. And when you use the same nerves over and over, so if I swing and I keep practicing and I take my right arm, my hitting arm underneath my shoulder line, and I keep working on that, And we'll get into this a little bit more in a minute, but what happens is when I do that over and over and over thousands of times, the body starts trying to become more efficient. And so it starts taking this myelin, this fat substance, and it starts wrapping it around the nerves that are going from my brain and down into my arm, my shoulder, my chest, whatever I'm trying to work on. Understand for just a second, this is probably an important visual to try to for everybody to get in their head. There are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of nerves that are running from your brain down to all different parts of your body, just to the muscles themselves, right? There are only specific nerves that we're wanting to use over and over and over again that go from your brain to your spinal cord, let's say to your right arm and shoulder. So when we train, we're not training all those muscles in your shoulder. We're not training all those nerves. But when we train the same specific movement over and over and over, right? We want to be very precise with our training. When we train the same movement over and over and over, certain nerves start getting wrapped over and over with this myelin. And it's this fat substance. And what does it do for you? It does this. It allows the electrical signal or impulse, the electricity to go from your brain to your arm, to your shoulder muscles that you're using, right? Faster, quicker, more efficiently. And it does it in a very coordinated fashion. So instead of being the typical 13-year-old who looks herky-jerky in his or her sports movement or in their volleyball swing, when they've done it enough, it looks smoother because the myelin has wrapped around the nerves going to those muscles, and now it's a much more efficient, much faster system, right? All right, so I'll take a breath, let Darian let you respond to that.
Yeah, so everybody, if you kind of look at the visual where Billy was drawing, he can kind of show you he drew these squiggly lines over where the brain is going to where it's wrapping around the muscles, right? This is it wrapping around the muscles and getting thicker and thicker, I would assume, right, Billy?
Yes. Yep.
Yep. So once you get to that point, and if you do it at a very young age, this by the time you're 20 and playing in college is something that's going to be so engraved and thick that it's a lot harder to change. That's why people say it's much easier to break bad habits when you're younger, right? Especially when it's something that you've like volleyball where you've been swinging and playing for so many years. And I know that's something that as a player I can speak to because from the moment I started playing volleyball, it was okay, lift your elbow up high and swing and use your shoulder to swing hard. Don't they nothing about hips or shoulders or belly button or power C position. None of that was taught to me until I was like a senior in college. And by that point, I had been playing since I was 13 and now I was 22. So that's a long time to then try and break what was that 8-9 years of habit of swinging the same way or being told the same things to now have to switch it to a certain thing. So if you are younger, this is the point where in your off seasons in the summer, instead of just training the same thing you've been taught, train things that will actually benefit you and allow you to hit the ball harder. But not only that, but also be safer on your shoulder and just your body in general. So that way you can play for longer. I don't know what you have to say to that response, I guess, Billy.
Well, I think it brings up a couple things. One, this myelin, how do you accelerate the myelin come down? Because there's a lot of studies, there's a lot of people for years have been talking out there. Experts are saying it'll take you 10 years or 10,000 repetitions, to become world class at something. In this case, if you want to become a world class power hitter, it'll take you 10 years or 10,000 reps to do that. Well, how can we accelerate that? Like, I agree with that, but I also think it's how athletes train and how they're coached that impacts that. And so you can either speed up the process of myelination, or you can slow it down. So to your point, let's say we've got an athlete that's young, and the ideal age for us to start training athletes to do this, to teach these mechanics and these movements, is around 13 or 14, right? They're at the age where some of them are really starting to determine they want to be better at volleyball. They want to learn good technique. And so they're willing to start focusing. And that is a really important key. How do we accelerate this process to where we can get that myelin there faster? They can become a better hitter faster, right? Hit harder and protect their shoulder. Well, let's talk about this for a second. Here's the keys. I'm going to cut to the chase. Focused, repetitive training, right? Focused is really the key. What does focus mean? Pay attention. There are times we see athletes, you can see it, you can go into any gym, You can go into any lesson, volleyball, baseball, soccer, lacrosse, doesn't matter, basketball, and you'll watch an athlete. If you see the athlete that's not paying attention, they're not focused, then their brain's not really engaged very well into the movements that they're trying to create. Well, guess what we just said? The brain is where these instructions get started, right? And that's where they get stored, and then the brain tells the muscles what to do. But if the athlete's not focused and not paying attention to their technique, then they're slowing the process down. That's the athlete that's going to take 10,000 reps or 10 years because they're just not thinking about it very much. Training initially is about thinking. And even though there's a lot of athletes that don't want to think, then I'm going to suggest to you, you're not going to get better very fast, right? You do need to think. And so for us, I'm just going to say two things. Number one, if you want to get better faster than your competitors you're competing against for playing time, what team you're on, college scholarship, whatever your aspirations are, right? Focus, right? Focus, particularly pay attention to your movements and start to feel and understand what the correct movements are and what the incorrect movements are. Both are critically important to speed the learning process, speed the development in the brain, speed the development in the nerves of the myelin being put around those nerves, where they'll learn faster, they'll compete faster, and they won't have to think about it. When you take a young athlete and you bring them into one of our clinics or into a training session, you teach them a new movement, they are literally thinking through the movement when they start the process. They're using the forefront of their brain, right, to literally think through the swing. And of course, we know in about week 3 or 4, kids come into the program and their mom or dad will call us and say, oh my God, he or she's so frustrated because when the ball goes live in the air, they're forgetting how to do all this. Yeah, they haven't built the myelin yet. They haven't done enough weeks, reps, right, over weeks, months, years, whatever the case is, to really build muscle memory. They're still literally thinking through their swing. And of course, when the live ball goes into the air, what's their brain do? The brain now forgets about pulling their arm under their shoulder, opening their chest, turning their hips. It goes back to a thinking process. If you want to be a better athlete, compete, be at a higher level, you've got to focus and be attentive. That's like the key. In different people will talk about deep practice, right? Deep practice comes from the talent code. We reference that all the time. Deep practice just means you're deeply focused. You're paying attention to the movements you're doing, paying attention to the correct and the incorrect movements, trying to take away the incorrect movements and perfect it, but they don't need to be perfect movements, but they need to be close. They need to be close to the precise movement you want. If a kid's not paying attention, then they don't have the ability to self-correct. They don't have the ability to really accelerate the learning process.
Yeah, definitely. I ditto all of that. This is kind of a different, I guess, overall topic, but kind of related to this. Let's say you are a player. We got a question on Instagram on this live stream about jumper's knee and what to do if you have jumper's knee. Maybe if you want to be doing this training, what is some advice to maybe get to the source of that problem, fix it, so then you can train?
Yeah, I mean, that's way off subject. That has honestly really very little to do with muscle memory. I'm going to answer it really quickly and then let's get back into this. Jumper's knee, oftentimes, patella is your kneecap, and it's an alignment issue many times, right? Your kneecap needs to be tracking straight up and down your femur. That's the bone in the thigh here. And when it doesn't, because of imbalances in strength between your quads, your hamstrings, the muscles are in the thighs and the lower legs and upper legs, when they get off, then the kneecap doesn't track where it's supposed to over the femur, right? And then it gets off and it creates pain. It can create injury. That's not so much a muscle memory issue initially to make the pain go away. It's a muscle balance issue. It's a strength and flexibility issue that you have to get the right muscles in your quads, your hips, and everything working to get the kneecap to track once again, right? Once it tracks, then there are certainly things we do in our vert masterclass, right, where we're teaching the athletes like, hey, pay attention to how you jump and you land, and let's make sure that your hip is over your knee and your knee is over your foot. Then that can become a muscle memory thing, because now once we've dealt with the strength and flexibility issues that impact the tracking of the knee, then it can become a muscle memory issue where we're trying to build that muscle memory. But I guess to segue back into the main topic, if we're trying to build muscle memory here, whether it's how you're jumping, how you're landing, how you're hitting, whatever you're doing from a volleyball perspective, Once you're doing your program, you should be paying attention, a lot of attention, be very focused on the technique you're using, the position of the feet, the movement of the arm, the movement of your chest. Slow down, even though we're trying to create speed. The initial part of the training is not so fast that you can't sense what your body's doing where your arm was, right? I mean, for example, you take an athlete, if all they're doing is saying, okay, I'm going to go in and try to swing really fast and hard, and they swing fast and hard, and you say, where was your elbow? And they have no idea, right? Part of that is they're training too fast initially, so we need to slow the process down and let them feel, right, the proper movements, the right mechanics, and that's how we train. We teach slow technique first and mechanics. We start to groove that, build the right muscle memory of how to move the arm, the chest, the hips, the legs, the shoulder, the knees, whatever. Then what we're going to do is once they get the base mechanics down, we're going to start adding strength to that, power and speed to that. So first we got to slow the thing down, and the athlete has to be attentive to build that muscle memory.
Yeah, and I want to circle back on one thing you said about people or athletes being able to recognize what they're doing, and that's part of muscle memory too. Is when you swing, can you recognize what your body's doing? I know that's something that we talk a lot about at Powercore 360. Can athletes feel what they're doing in the air when they're going to hit? And once you get to that point when you can, you're able to then self-correct and then get better, hopefully a lot faster, because you know what your body's doing. You know when you do something correctly or when you do something wrong. And then you can easily then be like, I know why I hit the ball into the net, or I know why I hit it out. And I think that really does take you to the next level as a volleyball player. I think we see a lot of high level volleyball players not even have to look at their coach a lot of the times when they hit the ball into the net or maybe hit it out, because they know already what they did wrong, right? I think that's a very high level thing. I think that if you don't have that ability, then you see a lot of these athletes being like looking at their coaches or parents and saying, what did I do wrong? Why am I not hitting it over the net? And I feel like one thing we want is for our athletes that we train with to be able to have that feeling and be able to kind of self coach in those moments, which I think is a really high level and important thing that a lot of athletes maybe don't understand or know quite yet at such a young age.
Yeah, I mean, we just call it self-correction, right? And the ideal athlete to work with is the athlete that is paying attention, does want to get better. They're not there trying to please mom or dad. They're there trying to get better themselves. So they're very focused, they're just very focused on what they're doing. And so they will start to tell you, like, oh, I didn't do this, I didn't do that, right? That's great, because they're going to learn faster because they're paying attention, right? The kid that's not going to get better very fast. And quite honestly, the kid a lot of coaches don't want to train is a kid that's not paying attention. You're looking at them and they're looking around, they're looking at the clock, they're doing this. It's like, they're not paying attention, right? It's a slow process, a slow train for them to get better. So you're looking for the athlete. You want that athlete to come in, be super motivated, and pay super attention to what they're doing so they can self-correct. That's how they're going to get better faster. And if they don't, they're going to bankrupt their parent, because they're going to go to 50 different coaches, right? Trying to find someone that can help their kid. And the problem's not in the coach, the problem's in the kid. The kid's not paying attention, doesn't necessarily want to get better. Some of that comes down to, when do you start training? So oftentimes in some of our sessions, we won't allow 12-year-olds in our master class. They're not ready, even though they might be going on the court and they're relatively skilled. We're talking about their ability to focus and have attention to their training, pay attention to their training, so they can build this muscle memory faster. Does it make sense?
Mm-hmm. And talking about our training, some of you guys maybe don't know everything that's offered in our master class and kind of how that whole structure works. I know we get a lot of messages about kind of have more information about the master class. What does the master class training look like? And I know we have a lot of interest on it from posting socials, and people will comment masterclass all the time, and then we'll send them to our website page. But I think this is a good opportunity to hear from Billy himself, who obviously created the program. What does the masterclass really truly provide to people as a program, whether it's in season, out of season? If you can kind of break down, what does the masterclass look like in training and how does it work, I guess?
Sure. And I guess the ultimate objective with it is we're trying to build muscle memory. If you go to one of our clinics or anybody's clinic, in our 8-hour clinic, you go there, we're going to do a great job and have great results short term to teach the athlete what's it feel like, what does it feel like to step, to throw, to turn your hips, to do this with your arm. They will feel their body change, right? But it's short term because they're thinking about it here. There's no muscle memory that's been built in anybody's clinic. It doesn't happen in 8 hours or 8 minutes, right? The process in an 8-week masterclass, the purpose of the masterclass is to build muscle memory. You leave a clinic of ours and you say, I really like this approach. Mom and dad, I'm willing to do the work. That's the athlete that's going to do very well. Because for us, there's a ton of touch points. There's a ton of activities that we're doing with the athlete, the parent, and the coach, right, to teach the athlete how to build the right muscle memory, how to perform the right movements to build a muscle memory. So with that all being said, that's the purpose of the program, is to build muscle memory. So there's got to be a lot of points where we're giving the athlete feedback. So let's just quickly go through the breakout of it, right? So over 8 weeks, there's going to be 24 hours of prescribed or programmed activities, homework for the athletes. 3 days a week, they have to do homework. Most of the time, it's about an hour routine that they have to do. They're in the harnesses, they're in the bands, they're hitting, they're throwing, they're doing the things we want them to do. They're taking video of it. They upload that video to our private Facebook group, right? And what happens is actually to a folder, and then one of our coaches breaks down the video from the homework, from the exercises, the strength, the condition, the mechanics, the technique, right? One of our coaches breaks that down, posts that on the private Facebook group. And then the expectation is the parent and the athlete sit down between each homework session and they look at our feedback. They integrate what we're telling them to do into the next homework session, to modify the mechanics, modify the band position, do whatever we want them to do to get better, right? 4 times per week, we run live group Zoom training sessions, right? Where we're training the athlete, we're seeing them, doesn't matter where they're at. They're jumping, they're hitting, they're landing, they're swinging, they're throwing. We're watching them and we're correcting them in live Zoom calls saying, you need to do this, you need to do that, do this differently, right? All this put together is a lot of touch points with us talking to the athlete via video, via live, right? Whatever the case is, to where they're building the muscle memory because we're correcting the technique. We're asking them to be very aware of what they're doing and start to feel it so that, and you'll see it day by day, week by week, the athletes starting to do less of having to think about the swing and more of them starting to build a muscle memory, the myelin around the right nerves, because they've thought about it, they've repped it now hundreds of times. In a couple of weeks, a couple of months, it's going to be thousands of times. They're starting to build that ability to build muscle memory, right? So it's really a good process. It's a good process for a super motivated young athlete that wants to focus on getting better. It's not for the athlete that wants to just be good at rec ball or maybe just play high school. It's for the athlete that thinks they want to be good and good enough to play on a really good club team, a really good high school team. And more than likely for a lot of athletes, they want to go on and play in college, right? But they're going to have to separate themselves in terms of hitting velocity and stay healthy to do that. So we're there working with them for 8 weeks to make them better. Big commitment, big process, big results for the athletes that engage and do the work.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that was basically all the time we had to talk about this specific topic before we get into this week's social questions. So audience, if you guys have any more questions about how to build muscle memory, what the swing should look like while building muscle memory, or the masterclass program, feel free to comment any of those below and we will answer them right now. But we have a few social questions from comments or DMs on all of our social accounts. So if you also have any other questions unrelated to this topic or really related to anything volleyball, go ahead and comment them now and we will do our best to get to everybody's questions. But I want to start out with one that is kind of interesting. I know Billy and I don't know if we'll completely understand this, but it was, what is the difference between a swing you teach and a roundhouse swing? I would assume that when they say roundhouse swing, they're saying like you're winding up your like arm and going like a roundhouse type of thing, which that hurt my shoulder even doing it. So I don't suggest doing that necessarily. But could you explain maybe what the difference is there from that perspective?
Well, from my perspective, once again, not really knowing what they mean by roundhouse. Roundhouse to me, from working with martial arts or MMA athletes, is like a roundhouse kick. your body is rotating, and that's good. Your body's creating torque, and that can get transferred from your body into your hand and arm and wrist to hit, or into your foot to kick. So that's a roundhouse. It's a rotational movement. We teach rotation, but of course, with the volleyball arm swing, we're not turning the body and having the arm, if you could see this, going across the body there. If I'm a left side hitter and I'm rotating and my elbow stays down here, if I'm doing this kind of a movement and I'm a left side hitter, guarantee you're going to hit that ball out of bounds. And I had a experience 10 years ago. I was working with a Division I college program in the summer, a local one, and I had an outside hitter that made dramatic changes, right? She was their starting outside hitter. And then the first day of practice, I get a call from the coach saying, hey, whatever her name was, is hitting every ball out of bounds on the opposite side of the net. And I said, all right, let me come over and watch practice. I came over and I realized that was my bad, right? Because she was rotating her body, but we didn't get her elbow up. She didn't realize on every swing, she's got to get her elbow up into this high elbow right before contact to be able to basically swing through the ball and pull the ball down the line or hit the ball down the line. So she was rotating her body into the left side when she was contacting the ball. She's hitting the right side of the ball, pulling it out of bounds, right? She's pulling it out of bounds with power, but that might be more of a, I'm not sure what a roundhouse is beyond the definition I gave you for MMA or martial arts. We're teaching whole body rotation, but we're also teaching, once again, we talked about this last week, the whole body, the axis, the spine, all the way down from the head down to the hip and pelvis need to be tilted in the air. And you'll see the world-class hitters do this. Their right hand and arm will be coming and be basically on top of the left leg, but their body's rotating, their arm and shoulder is being brought through, the elbows coming up high, right, towards the top of the ball. They're creating rotational power and torque, but they're able to actually take the hand through the ball, through the center of the ball, and hit a line shot, or cut it over to a 4, cut it over to a 5 zone, right? But the body still needs to be rotating, if that makes sense. Not really sure what a roundhouse is beyond this definition, but there are similarities. If we're talking about the correct roundhouse, the rotation of the body is really good. You're going to create more power than just what happens with a high elbow arm swing where there's no body rotation, right? And it's just arm and shoulder trying to create the forces and tolerate the forces, which they don't do very well for a lot of athletes long term.
Yeah, super interesting. So that's hopefully that explains the difference between our swing and a roundhouse from the best understanding that we could have from that question. The next social question that we have is, what is the importance of ankle mobility training for volleyball? It's kind of a vague question because I know that it can be like in relation to hitting, jumping, landing, performance, injury, all those things for you, Billy. But if you could just give like an overall.
Sure. Yeah, so let's address it maybe from a jumping perspective. You could be front row athlete, middle, outside, whatever, whether you're doing your approach, you just block, jump, or whatever. But it could also be a back row player too, who's going for an out-of-system ball to dig it or pass it or something. So let's talk about ankle mobility. Mobility is a term that means normal movement, normal range of motion from your ankle. In the vertical jump class, we've had a couple of young female athletes in the last couple of months, and one male 16-year-old that their ankle mobility was not normal. And so we got a couple weeks into the program and realized when they were jumping and landing, their heels weren't even going to the ground, right? And as we started to test them, we're like, their calves and their Achilles, their heel cords, the Achilles goes from your calf down into your heel, right? Was so tight they didn't have the normal mobility of their ankle, normal flexibility in the Achilles tendon. That impacts your jumping ability. It might create some pain and stiffness. You're increasing your risk to have ankle injuries and Achilles rupture and Achilles tendon rupture, right, which is significant and serious. From a performance perspective, you're impacting their ability to jump. The calf muscle, the Achilles tendon are so important, especially on a quick jump, right? Where you're coming down on the ground, you're not getting down into a full squat to jump up again, like maybe a blocker, arms up extended, you block, you come to the ground, you got to get right back up quick. A lot of that comes from your calf and from your Achilles. But if your ankle mobility, especially because your Achilles is tight, your calf muscles are tight, because they're never getting stretched and made really the normal mobility and then control on the ankle, you're going to lose your ability to jump quick, fast, and then you have serious injury risk that's increased. So it's important whether you're anywhere on the court, it's important. to have that full mobility and control through that, what we call control or stability through the ankle foot, to be able to land, jump, get that stretch in the calf and the Achilles, and get off the ground quick, fast, and high, no matter which direction you're going on the court.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And it's definitely something that's really important for volleyball athletes, especially if you do want to, I guess, avoid injury and jump higher at the same time. Our last social question today is how do you improve your serve as a beginner? Do you have any tips, I guess, that you or little drills that you could give a little insight to for the question?
Yeah, and do we have an age parameter here? Do we know how?
They
I'm
didn't
assuming
say how
11,
old, but I
12,
would
13.
assume, yeah, somewhere around there. Let's go with that.
Cool. Well, let's just take a typical young athlete. Let's say somewhere between 10 and 12 years of age. They're maybe starting to play club or serious volleyball, and the typical problem is they can't get the ball over the net, right? And they can't get the ball over the net mostly because it's back to the muscles. If I'm just being taught a high elbow, I've only got a certain amount of muscle mass and certain amount of strength and force I can develop with the arm. It's not enough to hit the ball hard enough to get the ball to go over the net, right? And anybody, if you're out there in the audience right now, put your left hand over your right shoulder and over your right arm, you're going to realize there's not a lot of muscle mass there. It doesn't matter if you're male or female at 12, most of them haven't developed much muscle mass. Even at now 18 or 20, there's still not a lot of muscle mass there. So you can build up the arm and shoulder, the strength of it, but as a 12-year-old, you don't have strength, right? You don't have power. So what do? Well, the first thing we teach them to do is the step. To take a step is so important for your body weight to shift from me. If I'm a right-handed hitter or server, I'm going to step just like I'm throwing. I'm going to step from my right foot to my left. That weight shift moves my muscle mass. And if I'm now stepping and turning my body, right, without getting into the details of what part of body, just rotate your body once again and let your arm come through last. Now we're using the forces and the strength from your leg muscles, your hip, your butt, your chest, your abs, all these big muscles once again. Even if they're poorly conditioned on a 12-year-old, that's still better than just the arm, what we call the fly swatter, trying to move by itself. Take a step, let your body turn, right? Make it turn initially, because most of the time they're not even being told to turn. They're just swinging their arm at it. We want them to step. We want them to rotate their body, and then let that power whip their arm through, and they'll start feeling immediately, and you'll start seeing immediately that if they'll do that action, they're going to hit the ball further and harder and now have a chance of getting the ball over the net. That's step one. Don't worry about where the ball's going and it's scoring. Step one is at a young age, figure out the right mechanics to get the ball over the net.
Awesome. Yeah, that's some great tips for all of our young volleyball players out there, or any players or coaches that are dealing with some beginners that really want to improve their serve. I actually have one more question for you, Billy. This is from Shannon on Facebook. What is the best drill to teach high contact, arm fully extended hitting? And is this covered in your program? Also, need tips on improving my wrist snap.
Okay, let's break that down. Can you put that
Yep.
up there, Darian,
Yep.
so I can see it? So the best teach to drill high contact, arm fully extended. Let's clarify once again. We're talking about, like we did last week, we're not talking about a high elbow in the setup. We're talking about as the hips and chest start to turn from right antenna, right sideline, towards left antenna, left sideline, the elbow is going to come up high, right? Well, the rotation of the body, and if the arm is in the correct position down here when you start to train it, as the rotation comes up, and we're going to give the athlete the feel for how to bring the right elbow up next to the right ear. And then the cue we use is we talk about the Shaq high five position. That means that's an abbreviated term for Shaquille O'Neal. So we're telling an athlete, hey, imagine Shaquille O'Neal was in front of you, Shaq was on the court in front of you, and he wanted you to give him a high five, right? Shaq is whatever he is, 7'2", 7'3". By the time you take his eye and arm up, it's 9 feet, 10 feet almost, right? So we want the athlete to rotate. We want the right elbow coming up next to the right ear high, because ultimately we want the hand coming up to out in front of the right shoulder, and we want them to imagine you're going to have to reach way up high to give Shaq a high five, right? That's the tip we use, and then most young athletes, a lot of them will know who Shaq is, and if they don't know who he is, just tell them you've got a 7-foot individual with their arm extended, and you've got to try to reach up and give them a high five. So you're going to basically, here's the tip of the body. You're going to get the right elbow up next to the right ear, and you're going to give Shaq a high five way up in front. That's how we teach it. We want them to feel that. And then, of course, when we put them in our system, we've got bands on and we're strengthening the muscles, creating the muscle memory of all those muscles in that specific movement to make that movement happen with the chest, the arm, the elbow, the shoulder, the wrist, the hand.
Yeah, and to elaborate on what Billy's saying, it is covered in the program, and when you are in the gear, that is one of the drills that you will be doing is practicing how to load and then bring your shoulder up and then your elbow up and contact then at that Shaq height for contact. And then for wrist snap, we kind of touched on this last week, but more than anything, we just say to keep that wrist loose and have that come on top of the ball. But don't try and just be like this.
Yeah.
Right? If you want to expand on that, Billy.
Yeah, really quickly, once again, the normal motion of the shoulder, the hitting arm here is what we call pronation. From a thumbs down position, we go up to the Shaq high five. And I'm going to try to get down where you can see this. At contact, it's like the thumb is going from a down position to an up position and then down position again. That's pronation of the shoulder. That's the natural movement of the right shoulder. We want that to happen. But we also, as your point, Darren, we just want the arm to be loose. If you're trying to swing, and that's what all of us as athletes do, we try to swing some. You're trying to swing your arm, you try so hard that you actually create a lot of stiffness and tension in a lot of the arm and shoulder muscles. Then your arm's not coming through lucid, it's not coming through quick and soft, it's not going to come through with a lot of arm speed. And so we'll tell sometimes the clinics and the athlete, like, all right, hey, tense up your arms, right? Like tense them up and try to take a fast swing, and they'll realize, oh God, their body doesn't move fast, their arm certainly doesn't move fast. They're not going to hit with any kind of dynamic arm speed or ball speed. So two things, we don't want them to really snap their wrist. That's not a motion we're really trying to make happen, even though at times, depending on the ball and the ball flight and the swing shot you take, there may be a time where you actually are bending your wrist, going from a very extended position to a flexed position. But oftentimes there's pronation that's happening in the shoulder and the wrist and fingers are relaxed to hit the top of the ball or towards the upper half of the ball to create a top spin ball that's going to go over the net and drop velocity and have a chance of scoring. So we're not just pounding the ball past the end line and you don't score. So relax the arm, take it out of your mind that you need to snap your wrist. I think it's more important for the athletes to think about keeping a loose wrist. And so actually I was working with a hitter last night, a 15-year-old, and it was just a drill. I just was taking her arm and having her go through external rotation right of the shoulder. And I wanted her to feel what she normally hit was just like every other athlete. They've learned to hit a floater with a stiff wrist. And I just moved her arm last night and said, I want you to feel the relaxation of the shoulders this movement happens. And I want you to actually feel like your wrist and hand are just getting slung through there. That's what will happen if you relax your wrist. And then, of course, we took that into the rest of the swing to have a relaxed wrist, relaxed arm, to create arm speed, arm velocity, and to learn. We were working on trying to hit a top spin ball last night. But anyway.
Yeah. Good explanation on that. I guess kind of like 3-part question. So that was always good. Thank you, audience, for all your questions today. We love answering any and all of your questions. If you have any other questions for us, please comment them here or message us, and we will be sure to get to them next week if you tune in. Next week, Billy won't be here, but Kelly, who has been on the live stream before, will be, and we will be answering more volleyball and PT-related movement questions. We'll show you guys some good examples for how to move your body and also some good recovery drills and examples of those. So we will be covering all of that next week in Volleytalk on Wednesday at 4 p.m. And then Billy will be back soon after that. So yeah, any questions you guys have, be sure to comment or message us, and we will try our best to answer all of them. And thank you guys all for listening in today. This was another episode of Volleytalk. This was Volleytalk 7. It's crazy. It's already been 7 weeks of this, so that's great. And yeah, thank you everybody for tuning in. We will see you guys next time.
See ya.